of you have been asking for even more information about the 911 Carrera. This car was due for some regular service, and I planned on doing some track prep, an overall inspection on the car's health, and I thought I'd show you what that looked like. So this year's driving season is almost upon us, and after last year's sale of the Dragon Run, the tires on the 996 were pretty much done. The 996 will be getting an oil change, a full tech inspection for track days, and some other odds and ends. Now, most of what we're going to cover in this episode, you could do right in your own home, even without a lift. I have a lift in Tim's Enthusiast garage, but I thought I'd bring it down to my friends at Auto Assets. I introduced you to them earlier in the season because they really have know-how, and I thought that they would help explain some of the things that you should check out on your car prior to aggressive driving and heavy use. I've done track days and road rallies in just about everything from a Lotus Esprit to a Mustang to a GTI, race-prepped M3s, and everything in between. I'm far from an expert, but there's one story I want to share with you that was really scary and shocking. There was a club event driving through a mountain pass, and there was a guy there that had absolutely no idea what he should have checked out beforehand. He showed up in a very beautiful 944 Turbo, but it turned out he had absolutely no brake pad left. Some groups will do tech inspections, but some won't, and it could have been disastrous if you would have gone forward with the drive. Maintenance and inspection is essential. So the long, cold winter is finally over. I'm here at Auto Assets with my friend Jason Boyd, one of my favorite techs. Today we're going to be focusing on track inspection, getting the oil change, getting the car ready for another summer, spring season of heavy use. And Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been fixing cars basically for a living since early 90s. Been around a lot of European cars my whole life, a lot of racetracks.
A lot of people take it for granted that they put their car away in the winter, they take it back out and assume that everything is the same way it was before they mothballed the car. Things degrade. These are mechanical devices, and just like any mechanical device, there's some breakdown. So yeah, we're talking about waking your car up for the first time after the winter. And Jason here I thought I had a pretty good mouse story. Jason's got a killer, a killer mouse story.
Okay, so before you start your car after it's been stored, it's a great habit to just open your air box and have a look at it. Mice tend to gravitate towards the paper to make nests. I had a customer that had a Miata stored for the winter, jumped in it, fired it up in the spring, drove it away. Long and short of it, it had a mouse in the air box dead when he started it. It sucked it into the valve train, blocked open a valve, and he had no compression on that cylinder. So that's like a cylinder head off repair that he could have avoided very easily by just having a look before he started it.
So today we're going to get into it and make sure this car is ready for Tail of the Dragon, for track days, for whatever I want to throw at it. The owner of Auto Assets is here with me. His name's Chip. We go back a long way, right, Chip? Long time.
We share a dog.
I gave him my dog. He's taken excellent care of Jetta. You saw Jetta in one of the short takes early in season 1. While I might be faster through the keyhole at Mid-Ohio, Chip is a professional race driver and last year's SVRA Sports 2000 champion. PT3R.
Best finish 23rd at Sebring in 2001.
There you go.
Best thing I've ever done.
Track
Besides getting married and have baby.
One of the issues you'll read a lot about on the internet that actually is a problem on 996s is radiators getting blocked up. They have great flow up front here, but have you ever cleaned them out? And if you're taking it to a dealership, are they cleaning them out properly? And I want Chip to tell you a little bit about what that process looks like.
The dealerships will clean the radiators, and cleaning a radiator to them means something different than it means to us. What they typically do is they'll go in with a vacuum, and that's usually where it ends. As these cars get older and they go through numerous owners, that debris can just get lodged in the back and can get packed back in there, and by itself isn't terrible, but if you drive in the rain once or twice, that debris becomes muck, and the muck ends up causing corrosion. You just vacuum it out, you're not getting the whole job done. You need some sort of a long tube to force the air all the way to the back of the cavity, blow all the debris that's jammed between the AC condenser and the radiator out.
Thankfully, this car has never been driven in the rain. Well, I wouldn't say never, but almost never driven in the rain. So everything was pretty dry. There wasn't a lot of muck, like Chip mentioned, and so there was no corrosion on the radiators. But look at all this stuff. When you've got the car up in the air, it's a great idea to do a visual inspection. Check all the hoses, look at the headers, check for cracks. If this car is a collector's vehicle, one that maybe you don't drive that often, check the belts for dry rot, because even though the car may only have 10,000 miles on it and isn't due for any belts, you're coming up on that time where the rubber has just exceeded its lifespan. That can be potentially ruinous. It could leave you on the side of the road, or it could wreck your engine internals. Now this is a good time to take an oil sample. I like to do oil analysis on my cars just so I know what's going on in there. Good oil analysis will give you the metal content or any issues that could be creeping up on your car, and again, allow you to catch it before it's an issue. This is, and I'm guilty of this too, you change your oil, you think, oh, I get another oil change out of this. Nope. Don't do that. Always crush
Every
washer.
time. Once they're crushed, they don't re-crush.
Go see a good independent that it will support you in doing your oil service. But get a crush washer with it every time. Bring your old oil to your independent and let them recycle it for you.
Totally worth it. Totally worth it. Don't skip on the crush washer. I've been guilty of it in the past, so I know a couple of you probably have too. But with regards to oil change, one thing that's really important is using a high quality filter. You've got to use an OEM spec filter and not one of these cheap filters that can come apart. And make sure you use proper torque specs, tightening the plug and the filter housing. Now, oil viscosity is always a big argument on forums. I pick 540. I think using a zero weight in these cars is the wrong call. So as you can see here, 410, someone has changed the brake fluid or inspected the brake fluid. Chip says that's nowhere near frequent enough. And he says every 2 years, is that right? If you've ever experienced brake fade, you will change your brake fluid very frequently. Brake fluid takes on water, and that will work its way down to the caliper. So you might look in the reservoir and it might look clean, but down at the caliper, it is yuck. Boiled brake fluid could cost you your life.
So where it ends up in your calipers and your clutch slave. Same fluid in your clutch, shares the same reservoir, gets neglected a lot. People will flush the brake fluid out. That old watery brake fluid that's in the clutch is still there until you bleed it as well. Put the probes in the brake fluid, hit the button. Oh, look at that. You want less than 2%. This needs done.
We are fans for a street car that isn't raced. Castrol GT-LMA is one of the best brake fluids on the planet. Low moisture absorption. When you look at brake fluids, you have two different ratings. You have a wet rating and a dry rating. The wet rating is when it gets saturated with moisture, and GT-LMA has the highest boiling point for wets. Really important part of your track inspection. And I see these lug bolts have some nice anti-seize on them, and that's awesome. And you're going to put that on with some sort of a four-way or a battery-powered impact or something to get them started, and then you're going to finish it off with your torque wrench. And everybody knows you should torque your wheels, but what a lot of people neglect is you should make sure that their torque wrench has been calibrated to make sure that you're torquing them properly. This car, at least at some point in its life, someone's put some anti-seize on there and did the right thing, so it's a good sign. In a perfect world, if this is going to be a permanently tracked car, you could put in studs. Studs would be preferable, just a lot easier to work with, but there's that added expense. If it's a dedicated track car, I'd definitely recommend doing lug bolts.
So while we're here, what else should we be looking at as far as, these cars came with drilled rotors. As far as suspension brakes, what are we looking at prior to track day?
Always the thickness of your pads, obviously. You don't want to go out and start a weekend and find out one day into the weekend that your brake pads are no longer. You're better off to start with fresh pads, have plenty. If you don't run out all weekend, you had a good weekend. These rotors will crack with heat on track cars, normally in between the drillings. You see a bunch of cracks in those. Throw them away and get new ones. All your ball joints in the front, the same rubber boots. It's got brake hoses. You want to make sure there's no visible signs of anything leaking, obviously, but also the rubber good and make sure that it's in good condition. These will swell and split and do all kinds of stuff when they start getting some age on them.
Notice too, he just pulled back the protective cover. A lot of times I've seen people just sort of wiggle that back and forth and say, yeah, it looks good. You're not actually looking at the thing that takes the force.
Yeah, but Tim, the most important thing about brakes is they just slow you down.
Yeah, Chip has actually never used brakes. If this car was going to be a dedicated track car, you said stud conversion, which I totally get. What about suspension pieces?
You know, the factory made some pretty trick pieces for the GT3 Cup cars. So the control arms for the front of the car would be a really wise modification if you're going to dedicate your 996 to a track car. Depends on what other pieces you find that are worn out in the process, but you're going to spend $1,500 with your alignment. Not a lot of money.
Totally reasonable for Advantage. And I have a couple friends that track GT3s. Actually, you know Andy. And most of the alignment setup and all the tweaks, you know, I got from Andy. And so it's definitely something that if you're about to replace these parts anyways, all the GT3 stuff is interchangeable. I know a lot of you guys are interested in alignment specs, and I'll post those in the description. Also, over the winter, it's important to check things that are just important to everyday use. And as I mentioned earlier, my headlight switch had failed, so we're gonna replace that as well. A real common thing with the 996, and pretty straightforward. This is how it goes, and it's a few minutes, and you got a new headlight switch in, and then your Lightronic or Xenon lights once again function properly. I have to say, Porsches in general are built to such a high standard. The suspension and braking systems are made to take quite a bit of abuse, and so in general there's not a ton of failures on these cars.
It does in fact when we go back. But it's always good to check before you set it down and then you can't remember. High beams, flash, better fogs, so that's everything.
Before any season of driving, typically I want to have at least 2 sets of tires ready to go. One that's more sticky than the other, one that's kind of a road biased tire, one that's kind of a track biased tire. If you plan on tracking your car, go ahead and get a set of slicks. And once wheels get to be 10 or 12 years old, I highly recommend inspecting each wheel before track time or even aggressive road use. Check for cracks, check for stress, because it could save your life. This year I'm going to have a set of 1552 Tarmacs mounted to a stickier set of Falcon tires. Now I will be doing some road driving with this car, so I didn't go with the most aggressive tire that Falcon had at this time because I wanted a nice compromise. And I also gotta say that having the latest equipment is kind of essential if you've got an exotic or a car that's going to be on the track. They don't damage the wheels, and balance has to be perfect because the car is going to be at higher speeds, and someone that takes that seriously is essential. This car really deserves an R compound tire for track use, and so I recommend an alternate set of wheels that you keep as a set of track wheels and then use something that's like a nice hybrid tire for the rest of the season. In my case, I'm going to use a year-round Continental on the original BBS wheels, and I might use those 60% of the time and the Tarmacs the rest of the time. And because of the weight distribution and really because how you're going to drive this car, these will go through rear tires at about double the rate of the front tires, and just expect that expense. One thing I want to talk about too, and some of you might have different feelings on this or might not really agree with me, but you have to run the same kind of tire front to back. And even the same age of tire, these cars are very, very delicate in terms of setup, and running a really sticky tire up front and a really not sticky tire in the back is just a recipe for disaster. Likewise, running a really, really old tire up front, one that's outdated and starting to dry rot, and a fresh tire in back is just a setup for disaster. Replace all 4 tires at the same time. This is the part where I just encourage everyone to go out and drive a 996. It is a great driving experience. I think you're going to buy one. I have a friend that just looked at a cab, a 3.4 liter 2001 cab for $11,000 with service history. What the heck? Seriously, you guys need to have one of these cars. I love the way the 1552 Tarmacs look on this car. I'm going to enjoy driving it. I'd love to drive mine with you driving yours. We're going to do some driving events this summer. Tail of the Dragon's coming up. Spots are limited. We've got like 53 spots still available. We're gonna tour the Biltmore. Tickets start at like $50. Let's drive.
Let's just listen to this guitar solo.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.